rolling VT now. So hang on to your hats.
I'll start singing.
Hang on.
Well, where's the music gone?
Oh, here's the music. That was completely the wrong music, and I apologise to one and all, but never mind. Here we are at Cladding Matters. Oh, my goodness, what is going on with the world? I do apologise, but I'll tell you what, it can't be helped. Today we have Cladding Matters with the inimitable, incomparable Hamish McClay, Wendy Gibson of the First Time Buyers Club, and of course, unrelenting Steve Day of the Building Safety Scheme.org. And before we get much further down this road, I just want to say that so much is going on in the world to do with property. That seems to be, as I said, unrelenting. And I'm hoping that we understand that by working together and pushing forward, we can achieve so much more, especially illustrated by Steve's work with Lord Lytton and the Building Safety Act. But what I would say is, before we go any further, I'm going to throw Hamish straight under the bus.
Well, I thought we should have a week here of let's sort of try and pull things together, and it's almost back to the saying what's not happening alongside what perhaps should be happening. It has been a busy week. We'll see Zara back with us next week. She was listening to some lenders this week, and we were hoping for a bit of input as to what was happening there with the developments in that direction. Steve had a vitally important meeting, and I'm sure they came up with some wonderful, wonderful ways forward that all will be remedied with his meeting with the MHCLG this week. But there was a fascinating revelation that Wendy, who we normally expect to be looking after people in the First Time Buyers Club, had some interesting things to say about the development, which is far, far greater in value in some respect, but something one wouldn't expect to hear. I mean, when you're speaking about millions of pounds for properties, and you've actually sort of find out this isn't a cladding issue. In fairness, it's not a cladding issue, but we do know in Royal Artillery Quays, it is not just a cladding issue. It's the standard of building. It's the quality of building. And this is one of the things that I hark on about. I'm probably speaking about the wrong people, but one of the thought the health and safety executive would actually be in there, sort of making sure that things were going right and basically building control, all of these things, but they aren't happening. But anyway, some revelations sort of coming forward, but I'm particularly interested because we haven't spoken to him in the meantime since Steve left the meeting with the government department, which is allegedly going to improve everything.
Well, I'm going to put Steve in the headlights. Steve, what word from the governors?
Well, so yes, I went to, online, I went virtually to a meeting with the Ministry of Housing and Local Government and Communities. And the agenda was basically looking at the gaps in the building safety regime. So for your viewers, there's 1.7 million excluded leaseholders in law by the Building Safety Act, which makes them liable for non-cladding defects. So that's people in buildings below 11 meters, people that have bought more than 3 buildings, and people that have chosen to buy their freehold and actually gone down the route towards common hold and shared ownership, which is the government is trying to, encourage with the banning of it for new buildings. So, that's an area. We also then discussed the insurance ramifications of living in buildings that aren't properly remediated. As we discussed last week, the PAS standard is a partial remediation standard, which condemns people to permanently hire insurance, where combustible material, often banned on new buildings, is left to stay on buildings. And also, without, in our case at Royal Artillery Quays, any fire performance test evidence to know the risk of leaving it there, even though it's banned on new buildings. So we discussed that, and we discussed reinsurance, which has been a bit of a political help, I think, around
But isn't
just saying, well,
isn't the cost of insurance the bone of contention? That's the. I mean, if I can use your example as a case in point, it's the nightmarish cost or impossibility of insuring places like yours that makes it such a bone of contention, doesn't it?
yes, no, that's absolutely right. And the insurers are just responding to the fact we've watered down the remediation standard. They're ignoring unlawful development at the time of construction. So say in our case, the fire brigade have said there's 0 fire shafts, right? There's no fire shafts at RAC on 3 consecutive audits. However, they still say that it was safe to live in, because why haven't they done anything about it over the last 5 years since those reports were done? And that's all hitting the insurer. So I talked about that example, and the reinsurance being time limited, which just allows insurance to be granted. It doesn't necessarily make it cheaper, it just means there's more cover. So we talked about that, and we talked about some of the more contentious stuff, which I'll bring up. So I asked them this question. I said, if you have protection under the Building Safety Act, and you now choose to enfranchise, would you lose your protections if you rely on your landlord to fund the non-cladding defects if you make that step, going the way the government wants with collective ownership? And they shockingly said, and we'd suspected it, but confirmed, that yes, you would lose your protections. So, that's something people need to hear loud and clear, that if you choose to buy your freehold and you got defects that are non-cladding and you're reliant on your freeholder, do not do it, because you will pay yourself because you've lost the protections. So they're giving away their insurance. So that's one thing. And then we talked about where the money is going to come from, because if we've got 1.7 million, it's not going to come from the Treasury. And obviously we don't know how many of the 1.7 million have got, defects, but if it's a sizable proportion, that's significant money. It needs to come from somewhere. And so we put down some proposals to them, because obviously we're wanting to, try and sort this out. So we're saying, one, and this is hot off the press, one, the PAS standard needs to be simplified. It's very, very sort of subjective by its own definition. Instead of arguing about this panel being left on and this panel not, ban all the combustible material on buildings above 80 meters, so that these conversations are no longer had, and it just all comes off, and it speed up the remediations, and it will deal with the insurance issue. That's point one. Point two, for the funding, the levy can be extended to include the cladding manufacturers, who are largely got away with it, and increased from 4% to 8%, which was done on one of the surcharge levies in the banking crisis. And it's a very simple to increase the levy, and they're making a lot of money. There's a lot of construction that's coming their way with Labour's house buildings targets and so on. Cladding manufacturers with their flammable products, well, they should be paying, I think. And the great thing is, Daniel Greenberg, the parliamentary lawyer I've worked with, has allowed the proposal and the legislation we're pushing forward to levy a different rate. So the developer is paying a certain rate. Cladding manufacturers, who have largely got away with it, should pay a bit more, because they are not clogged by the developer contracts. So that's all there. It's all in the legislation, ready to go. And so we will have another meeting. They've asked for another meeting. I've sent over some information on what I've discussed, and I think it's the start of a good kind of working relationship. And if civil servants are watching this, because I've actually posted it on my LinkedIn, please take these recommendations very seriously, because those recommendations will actually pave the way for getting the remediations done faster, to a better standard, and then we can move on to your targets. And
Steve,
my final word.
Steve, I'm sorry. For the first time in I don't know how long, I noticed a note of optimism in your voice.
Yeah, well, definitely. And, I think it's really important that we make it very clear that some of this stuff can be cleaned up quite quickly and simply by saying, yeah, just ban the stuff off. So you don't have all this complex discussion. It can't be there, so take it off. And that will solve the insurance problem. It's simple kind of ideas that would actually, and then just increase the tax on profit for the industry. Simple ideas, brings in the money, doesn't need a lot of work. But my final word is this. So this PAS standard that we discussed,
right,
being rejected by the insurers. Wow. Yeah. First tier tribunal case says the following. Any risk above low is understood as an ordinary unavoidable risk in residential buildings, and in relation to the terrible PAS standard, is within its expectations, may be a building safety risk, and they do not take the view that it's tolerable at all. PAS is no good. This is a judgment from the first tier tribunal, and we can make the link available. And that's basically bad news for PAS, because that means the courts and the insurers are rejecting the standard. So let's get the standard to meet the current regulations at the time. Ban the combustible material above 80 meters.
Well, that's good news. Good news for Lord Lytton's work.
It's all linked, because this is the way we want to go. Is let's get these changes in because they are simple, but then let's move to Lord Lytton's building safety scheme, where we actually then, going forward for the buildings, actually don't need to go to court to get redress done, that building regulations are then adhered to, because otherwise these builders will get clobbered again and again and again. All right, and that will clean the industry up.
Let me get a reaction from the sharp end of this whole process. Wendy Gibson, First Time Buyers Club. Wow.
It sounds really positive, and my experience of dealing with the government in the limited capacity that I had is you would think that any remediation that doesn't cost the Treasury directly should actually be grasped and clung onto, because that means it's not going to be taxpayers who are covering the cost to fix all the work. So it really sounds positive to me. And I'm delighted that there are other industries like the tribunal and also the insurance companies, and I think even the mortgage lenders themselves are taking on that baton of being the first line of defense and actually showing common sense and reason. So fingers crossed, let's hope that common sense does prevail and this does get pushed through.
I've got a comment from Matt Hodges-Long, who says, I do hope Ministry of Housing, communities and local government officials are ready to listen. This will be a market change from their behaviour, he says in his sanguine manner, in the last 93 months that have passed since Grenfell. Today's anniversary, we should at least acknowledge that. We would not exist. This channel would not exist if it hadn't been for, frankly, the uproar that Grenfell rightfully and the spotlight rightfully placed upon building safety. Wendy, do you think, in your experience, I mean, this government is still relatively new, green around the gills, waiting as they have been in the wings all this time to take power, do you think they will grab the metal?
I would love to think that they will grab the metal or the nettle, because I think we are fed up with the can being kicked down the road. I mean, as that comment shows, 93 months since the tragedy of Grenfell.
93 months.
It's appalling that we are no further on than what we are at the moment. There's just too much pontificating, there's too much navel gazing going on and not enough action. So this is really positive news that things have moved in a slightly forward in a positive direction. Let's just push on through, keep raising awareness and keep that momentum going.
Hamish, there's an awful lot of splinters that can be up someone's fundament if you sit on the fence for too long. And it appears that most of the powers that be have spent a lot of time doing this. Do you think that Steve's momentous meetings and the resolutions out of them represent a positive move?
Well, we can always speak positive. There's something that came to mind, and I was just, if anybody had noticed, I was looking sideways at my other screen, and I was trying to pick up an announcement. And I say announcement because we get these things, don't you, from each of these companies. They announce, and almost so it's tremendous achievement that, hey, look at us, we've made these magnificent profits. And now Barrett's have just released some information about magnificent profits higher than expectation after their amalgamation and all the rest of it. And it's sort of it's almost, when somebody says announcement, it almost creates a sort of happy voice in a way. And it's entirely the opposite that when one thinks about it. They're sat there, and the amount of bonuses those guys in their big glass houses are going to be gaining from these massive profits that are being made, yet they're quite happy to make those massive profits. They're quite happy to take those payments, yet leave people living in the sort of situation that Steve has to live in, where there is fire risk, there's no fire escape routes. And to me, when you actually look at that, and somehow or other, we get, as Wendy said, there's sort of pontificate, oh yes, we need to be doing this, we need to be doing that. Because, I mean, since the very, very day one, Steve has been mentioning about that PAS standard as being totally inappropriate. Yet the government, both the government, even the body that Steve had the meeting with earlier this week, and Barrett's themselves, the builders themselves, are relying heavily on this being an adequate standard. Now, nothing has changed in that. And it is, as Wendy says, it's good that people are speaking about doing things on a positive basis, but it's not happening. We still don't have a guarantee of the quality. I could go on. I better stop. Because there's just too much that isn't happening yet.
Yeah, so Hamish, you're trying to pull back on the cynicism here when we both acknowledge the fact that when I saw that profit report, hooray, profit report! When I saw that, I thought, well, surely a portion of that should be reinvested into fixing the 35% of all their properties that aren't bloody livable in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But Steve, you told me that figure, and they're not even the worst of it. There was another one you mentioned. It was over 70% of their houses.
77% for Taylor Wimpey.
But Steve, if you were, let's say you're doing a degree, and 75% of your papers are failed, surely that means overall you're a massive fail.
Well, definitely. The same with planes. Would you get on a plane if you were told there's 77% defect rate? Have a good flight.
One in four of our planes will stay in the sky. We don't know which one it is.
and that brings us to basically the situation. I believe, and it's my personal view, I believe that the building industry and the construction industry is being protected by our government and limiting the liability as a result of the horrors of Grenfell. The whole situation is about, yes, there needs to be a response, but it needs to be a controlled response, and the liability needs to be controlled. That's what the PAS standard's out for. That's why the London Fire Brigade, are having to manage all the fallout, because let's face it, they're the ones on the firing line, so to speak.
Unintended.
Yeah, and the problem is you've got a protected industry, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to break that protection, and we're trying to not empower our courts and lawyers to make a lot of money off the suffering. We're trying to do it outside of the courts with the old scheme.
It reminds me of the last, and this isn't intended as a pun, passing gasps of the old tobacco industry as it was.
Yeah.
And when everybody knew it killed you, we knew it should be stopped, and yet there were trundling on regardless. So everybody knows that having this stuff stuck on buildings ain't a good idea, and yet they're still fighting, or they're trying to delay. I've just had a message come in. It hasn't identified themselves, but I hope that organisations that monitor professionals within fire safety are prepared to improve ethics and show transparency, which is lacking. And never has more understatement been provided, which is lacking. You don't think.
But we do actually, the old scheme, let me just say this, the old scheme, this consumer protection legislation, will actually name and shame developers who have the number of determinations that go against them. So we'll have the, you could have the bad builder awards every year, and the worst builder will be right at the top. The kind of what we're getting a little bit with the developer contracts, with the 77% for Taylor Wimpey of like critical defects, there are lots of flats, but it would be really good going forward if that transparency were there. And then if this legislation goes forward, you'll be able to go on the government website, look up the building you want to buy off before you do it, and say, oh, actually, 2/3 or 1/3 no good. Do I want to take that risk? No, I don't. And it will self-clean up the industry, plus the liability that you'd have to go to the courts for redress from. So we really do need to. I think there should
be the Razzies for builders, whereby you get an award for being the worst possible builder, and it should be nice and public.
Yeah, I agree. And and the industry needs to not be a protected industry. They need to, just like the aviation industry, just like every other industry, not be protected by watered down standards and fire brigades taking a risk-based approach instead of enforcing the regs. This is really simple stuff. And to the disregard that they have for us at Royal Artillery Quays. Barratt have been asked by the council to meet us next Wednesday and have declined to meet, given an enforcement notice which has said it's unlawful what they've done with their construction. You would have thought they would be terrified of the repercussions of what we can say in the press and so on. They're not. They don't care. But it's shame on them that they're not coming.
Those sun loungers in Cannes won't occupy themselves,
No, they need to take these things more seriously. And right. I will update everyone next week on the council. They're meeting. They put a leaflet in every single one of the 500 residents' pigeonholes at Royal Artillery Quays, and they're meeting us. But they've asked Barratt to attend, given the seriousness of a London Fire Brigade enforcement notice, and they're not turning up. It's appalling.
Well, I think it should be named and shamed on national news. Maybe you should go back to your BBC connections and get them to take notice.
Maybe I will.
Oh, I think you should. Hamish, would you care to take us home? And please, sir, can I ask up front a slight positive light, please?
Well, what we're discussing only has a few minutes to run now is probably the most positive thing I could say. We have seen a glint that people are thinking rationally. People are thinking, but they are not acting. And I think this is a sad, sad thing. We need that action to take place. And as Wendy will sort of repeatedly say to us, where can she actually point people in the right direction to get the properties that they want to get moving into, to get the property ladder adequately placed so people can move up it. They need something to move into to start off with that can have guaranteed safety. We would like to make it safe, say some people, but liking to make it safe is not the same to making it safe.
Well, I mean, there you go on that bombshell. I also like to say thank you to all those watching, and apologies for the problems at the beginning. I had a bit of a digital issue. I couldn't move my digits, and I'll promise you that won't happen again. But until next time, thank you, Hamish McClay, for putting this thing together, Steve Day for reporting from the front line, and Wendy Gibson, who is there trying to make it work for the first-time buyer in these ridiculous circumstances. And hopefully, Steve, it's all going to come good.
Absolutely. It will do, because the whole country depends on it.
There you go. There's a councillor in the making. All right, until next time, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and let's make sure this works and we get those changes to makes you want to spit feathers. Until next time, look after your mental health. Everybody, bye-bye.
There's a tale about some folks with hammers and some nails. They'll plunge through the moon, but their word